So this is this is the regime in which scientists work, and this is my second kind of science. Okay, now what is a third kind? So the third kind, I named it not science. There's not science yet science. It doesn't seem to be science, but according to me, it is still science. So what do I call it? I call this philosophical science. So this is where philosophers work. So things that are not understood at all by scientists, and physicists and people and main scientists try to stay away from these things as much as possible, because there's no way for people to understand these things. How does emotions happen? What is the stimulation, or how, why exactly, what is the exact process of emotions? Or something like wild theories like, do aliens exist in this universe? If they do, what language do they speak? Things like that, some wild theories. So these are based on things that we are not able to understand anything at all. We can't formulate anything. They're just a set of observations, or some sort of an imagination based on a certain set of observations. So this is what I call as philosophical science. It is scientists, in their sense, try to stay away from these things because they feel in the long run they wouldn't be able to find anything meaningful. But uh, uh, yeah, they wouldn't be able to find anything meaningful. But I still call it science because it is still a set of observations. So things like another example is near-death experience. So people have reports, people have their own experiences of what a near-death experience is, but there is no way to formulate it. There's no way to understand it. So something like mental disorders and things like this. Scientists usually try to stay away from these things, but these are just a set of empirical observations. So what is philosophical science? I define it this way. So theories which seem impossible to prove with the current field of experiments. So do aliens exist? So these are all wild theories. So how much of this is true? There is no way. With the current set of experiments that we have, there is no way for us to prove it. So these theories exist as philosophical science. And from an experimental perspective, these are extremely empirical observations where it is almost impossible to find a correlation between cause and effect. Like, why does something called as a near-death experience happen? There's no way a scientist has understood this yet. So it's just a set of empirical observations. And this regime is what I would call as philosophical science, or not science yet science. So to sum up science, so the domain of science is, to define it very objectively, it is just, for me, any observation that we have. So all observations fall into the domain of science, but what is cause and what is effect is not yet well described. But to sum up science, it is just a set of observations. Okay, so going to the next part of my talk is, so now we know what this domain of science is. How does this science help us evolve spiritually? So, like I said, science is everywhere, right from small common things like talking to a phone to asking deeper questions, the deeper philosophical questions. Science exists in all of these regimes. So we have been observing and analyzing right from our birth. A child is very, very curious. A child wants to know A child sees a person walking and it wants to know how to walk, and that is when it attempts to start walking. A child is so curious that it starts picking up all the languages that the parents speak. So we have been observing and analyzing right from our birth. So a simple phenomena like, let's say, cooking. So there is a way to cook. So we know how much amount of salt to be added. We know how much amount of water needs to be put in preparing a dish, right? So there is a food, there's a procedure in which the food is eaten and the food is digested. We know that once we are hungry, we need food. So we need so how do we eat food? We put it into our mouth, then the food goes into our stomach, and then it gets digested there, and then the remainder comes out. So we know we know this procedure, and there is a reason why we feel satisfied. So we know that once we eat food, there is a sense of satisfaction. Now, how does this satisfaction come up? It's not still clear, but we know that there is a sense of satisfaction. There's a real feel of, okay, I am full right now. I don't need any more food. So there is a process in which all of these phenomena is happening, and there's a process in which we are understanding all these phenomena. So understanding of all these phenomena is science. So the way we cook, the way we eat, the way we feel satisfied is what I call science. So this is why I say science is everywhere. It's in every aspect of our life. So I just want to bring this one shloka from Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna says, "Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jato tishtatya karma krita karete hyavasha karma sarva prakriti jairguni." So Bhagavan Krishna, in this third chapter in Karma Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, he says, "Nahi kaschit kshanamapi," even for a single second, it is impossible to live akarmakrit without performing action. So Bhagavan Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says that it is impossible to live in this world even for a second without action. So since I am relating any sort of observations, any sort of analyzations to science, it is impossible to live in this world without interacting with science. There is always there's always a scenario where we think of something or we act on something, and all of this is, since they are since they are observations and analyzations that we have and analysis that we have, it is just part of science, is what I'm saying. So since we live in a world where we are heavily interacting, how would this science help to let us grow spiritually? So here I would like to bring up this topic of sadhana. I think many of us are already familiar with this topic of sadhana. So the way I understand sadhana is, it is a set of techniques or practices which helps one to develop sharpness of their mind, so that when the grace of Guru comes to them, they're able to understand in a very, very deep level. So for me, science is these kind of is a set of techniques that helps a person pursuing his spiritual life as sadhana. So what does science do? So, whenever we experiment on things, we are constantly bombarded with questions like how, why, when. We want to keep knowing. So science in that regard helps us develop a deep sense of curiosity, so that we can ask deep questions later on. So, a scientist is always thinking, where does this exact process happen? He's like, when would it happen? or how, or why does it happen? The most important question of all is why. We just want to keep knowing things, and we just want to keep knowing why, right? uh, the second thing that science helps us is to develop a very deep sense of passion. So develop unhinging passion to know the truth of something. So we are always behind something. We want to know why something happens. So it helps us develop a lot of passion to know. So here I have a cartoon where there's a boy and he's saying, what is it? What is it? What is it? He becomes old. He's a scientist. He's become old, and he's still maintained. He's still developed. He's still with that passion to know. So he still seeks with the same passion to know the truth of something. So finally, what I would like to conclude is that a true scientist is always seeking. He always wants to know. He's always curious. So a true scientist is always seeking, and this for me is his sadhana. Okay, I think I'm at the end of my talk here. So any questions?
Oh, that's great, Pranav. Yes, let's throw open the floor for questions. Anyone with questions can unmute and speak, please.
So now you give a wonderful comparison. A common day-to-day science, then a science which is yet to become science, where scientists don't venture out. So you give a range of or 3 levels of science. Science which is day-to-day, science which is in the domain of lab, and science is yet to become.
Yes.
And then you give a life of a scientist as more of a sadhana. No doubt, wonderful life of a scientist is a wonderful sadhana. Many of the scientists, what we see, they dedicate their life for a single cause. They spend 80 years, 90 years. It's a remarkable sadhana. The complete training of the mind, complete body-mind focus is very, it is a sadhana itself, a spiritual practice itself. Right, and some of them discover very fundamental truths of nature, which also is nothing but understanding nature, prakriti. Nature is also God only. So that way, scientist life is a sadhana in itself. I agree. But how is the personal life of a scientist? Is it sadhana improving his personal life? Ultimately, it's spiritual sadhana. It's about the mind becoming peaceful, mind becoming silent, and mind evolving into a compassionate, loving human being. Do scientists become humble, mature, and loving human beings, or they become arrogant? So I feel it is the other way.
With great knowledge comes great ego also, Guruji.
Right? In Sanskrit, they say, Vidya dadati vinayam. The knowledge should give humility.
Right.
Okay. So what I see scientists is that many of them, they become dogmatic. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens in spiritual life also. I won't say in spiritual life, in religious life. Even spirituality it happens. It's the human nature. What I say is truth, and everybody else is like almost like an idiot.
Yes.
The final aspects of human values, will they scientists be able to develop in this sadhana, or they become more narrow-minded?
I feel it can go both ways. So usually what I feel is that the way a person gets trained and when he becomes a scientist, or the way his thoughts are imbibed or infused in a person is it's through knowledge. So the greater knowledge, the greater knowledge someone has, the greater he's regarded as a better person or something like that in the society, right? So what scientists regard as their true value is knowledge. So in that path, in that path of in the quest of having more and more knowledge, it certainly makes him develop this sense of curiosity, this sense of passion. But I feel that if at all a scientist were to step away from this, that is when he becomes arrogant, is what I feel. Because if a person is always curious, he's ready to know more and more things. So he's ready to accept facts even from a child, even from someone who's not in his field. So he's like, okay, when a child comes and says this is this, instead of rather outright correcting the child, if he was really curious, if he was really passionate to know it, I feel that he would try to understand what the child says rather than downright disregard the child. So
Yeah, I've heard Feynman, the great scientist Feynman, the Nobel laureate. He always
Yes.
explains the complex truth to children first.
Yes.
And he's also known for his humor and a fine nature.
Right. So I feel like when a scientist in his quest becomes arrogant, which I feel that means he's not ready to accept someone else's opinions.
Yeah.
And that, I say, is the end of curiosity or passion or seeking for that scientist, is what I would say.
There's also tendency in scientific domain to the third category, right? Second and third category, what do you say? What has not become science?
Right.
So all those are clubbed under pseudoscience.
Yes.
And contemporary theory.
Yes.
Right? There may be something really happening there, but it's all considered pseudoscience. Even you don't even consider it as yet to become science. You'll consider pseudoscience and brush it aside.
Yes. So the larger scientific community, what they think is, so we have a certain way of approaching a problem. So a physicist always tries to look out how a phenomena happens from the base fundamentals that he has understood.
Right.
So in that regard, what happens in a human, in fact, we don't even know how just a collection of, let's say, 3 bodies or just a collection of electrons, we don't know how to explain that. So explaining human emotions, explain these things are like out of the question for a physicist. So most of the scientific community right now wants to have this bottom-up approach, trying to explain everything from these fundamentals. So in this approach, what happens is he feels like his purpose is defeated when he tries to when he tries to understand something as complex as a human. So which is why they just stray away from this and say that it's not even science.
Okay, so last question.
Yes.
The science is pursuit of material nature. And spirituality is pursuit of consciousness. Right? The outer journey and inner journey. What I call as outer journey and inner journey. Okay. So in the pursuit of outer journey, do they lose touch with the inner reality?
This is where Guru comes, Guruji. This is
Is
where
it?
a Guru comes.
Okay. Okay.
I feel we can always have a pursuit of inner journey and we can always have a pursuit of outer journey.
In reality, they're not two. In reality, there's only one.
I believe only a guru can bridge both of these.
Okay. Okay, Pranav. Thank you. Wonderful speech.
Thank you.
Shravan?
Okay. So, Pranav, I have another question.
Yes.
Sadhana in spirituality, the seeker knows what to seek. But is it true in all cases for a scientist? Sometimes he may seek something but may not know what exactly he's seeking, right?
So for me, okay, I just want to take two things in this. So for me, seeking happens only when you don't have a definite end goal. When you already know something is going to happen, then what is there to seek? So I feel the same thing applies in spirituality as well. We have heard of concepts of what jnana is. We have heard of concepts of what enlightenment, what Buddha's nirvana, or we have heard all these. And then we also know these things. Ramana Maharshi asks, always ask, who am I? And we know these as what I call as a belief. So to truly understand what these things are, we will have to go on a quest of our own. We will have to seek it out on our own. And when seeking happens, we should, I feel we should drop all these ideas of what might happen or what our end goal is. I feel seeking happens only in this way. If we know what our end goal is, I don't think we can call it seeking. In that way, I feel spiritual seeking and seeking in science is the same.
Okay. So you have to be open for whatever you are finding. That's what.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That's a good answer. But another point to this is if a scientist sometimes knows the what he has seen already and is now trying to connect this with something else, or he's in fact practicing. See, sadhana in normal things to practice something to get that, whereas here he's not really practicing in that sense.
In science, we obviously practice, right? There's like 15 years of school education to go through in order to understand even a small concept, right? We need to know what is 1 plus 1 in order to understand what is 2 multiplied by 2. We need to know what is 2 multiplied by 2 in order to understand what is 2 to the 4, 2 powered 4. We need to understand what is 2 to the 4 in order to understand how an exponential works. So it's always, science is always actually built up on what other people have said. This is why, like, when we write scientific papers, we have something called as citations. We always cite people. Saying this one so person has done this work, so we already know how things work in that case, and we're going to just build up on this person's work. Same thing I feel is there in spirituality as well. We can't always go on our own complete quest, our own new quest, and try to find out the truth. It's a bit too much, which is why we have these guidelines where Ramana Maharshi has said these things, and if you go along so path, you will be able to reach the truth. And Buddha has said so these things. So if you go along so path, you'll reach the truth. So I feel this what I would like to call as standing on the shoulders of great men is there in science as well as spirituality. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes. So that's,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's ask if there are any more questions. So sorry. So what is the domain of science as per what you're saying? I saw you began saying that it's a set of observations all the time.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
why are you saying only observations? And what do you mean including those observations?
So observation for me is any understanding that we have, any thought is an observation. Observation doesn't necessarily mean something that I see And I say, observation could also mean something like imagination. So something like, let's say, I don't know, a flying elephant. We know that a flying elephant doesn't exist in the real world, but we have a sense of understanding of what flying is, and we have a sense of understanding of what an elephant is. And based on these two images, we superimpose and we construct a new thing called as a flying elephant. So this is also science for me because it is based on a set of observations that we have made. So imagination, any thought is necessarily going to be science for me.
So it's basically from a known thought to an unknown thought.
For me, an unknown thought is nothing but a collection of known thoughts. It's essentially a thought.
That's a very interesting statement. Can you explain that?
Okay, so the way we build concepts is based on some previous concepts. Just like in this flying elephant example, we know our mind, we haven't really seen a flying elephant, but yet we are able to construct the image of a flying elephant based on some known concept of flying and some known concept of elephant. So that is how we construct something totally new, like a flying elephant or something, let's say like a unicorn or whatever it is. And that is how science progresses as well. We say, so when people couldn't explain the superfluid phenomena, you see, it's completely defying logic. So you're not able to put this liquid in a container. It defies gravity. It seems to defy gravity and just pour out. How do you explain this concept? So you need to bring in other theories. You need to bring in some sort of a new theory and try to explain. So how do we find a new theory? We go back to old theories. We say, okay, this particular statement might not be true. It might actually be in some other way. So we construct new theories out of old existing theories. So we are always developing on images that we have already seen and developing something new.
Yes, excellent. That's a good insight, Pranav. Any more questions?
So, Pranav, how far we are into unified field theory? Are we any closer?
So what science has, so we have categorized all the set of, so any interaction that we have, we can categorize into a force. So if I'm able to touch this phone, it's because there's some interaction, there's some force which is allowing me to interact with that particle. So the way of interaction with anything, scientists has classified it into 4 different kinds of forces. So unified theory for a scientist is trying to find a theory in which you are able to explain all these 4 set of forces. That you are able to come up with a theory where you would say, oh, in this and this regime, this force would be dominant. So this original interaction that I have will be dominated by this particular interaction. In this and this range, another interaction would be dominant, and that is how I interact with the world. So the thing is, right, so earlier we used to think that these 4 things have 4 different origins, and we didn't know if there existed a single origin for all of these different forces. So this is what unified theory is about. So far, scientists have been able to unify 3 of them. This 4th one, which is gravity, is the most annoying thing. No one is able to unite gravity into any of these things. So
what are 3 things integrated?
So the 4 forces are a gravitational force, electromagnetic force, and so all sorts of physical mechanical forces that we have, wherein we touch something, or all these, how we see some things, how we hear some things, all of these can be put into this one single electromagnetic force.
Okay.
then there is something called as weak force. This happens in inside the nucleus. So how a radioactive decay happens is because of this weak force. And then there's something called a strong force. So how these protons and neutrons are held together in the nucleus is by this strong force. So far we have been able to unify the strong force, the weak force, and the electromagnetic force. But this gravity just stands alone. It says, no, I don't want to integrate with you. So that's why
what is so special about gravity?
Yeah, so the thing is, all of these three forces have relative strength factors. So all of them have almost the same strength factors, and that is how we were able to draw a connection and say, okay, there is some way in which we can unite these things. But this gravity is a very, 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 very weak force, orders of magnitude weaker. So this is the reason why it just stands out, and we are not able to unite this at all. So scientists are coming up with different ways called string theory. So string theory is one, and there are so many other competing theories. So string theory became famous. There's another theory called as loop quantum gravity. These are some theories that scientists claim have some ground. If you were to talk to me, I would put the string theory in this third section, philosophical science. There is no way to right now experimentally prove it. It says we need 10 dimensions. We just have 3.
Okay. So therefore, speaking of the 4 forces, are there any more forces to be integrated or only 4?
So right now our understanding is that everything can be put into these 4.
Okay.
Into one of these baskets of these 4 categories.
Okay. What about my thoughts, feelings, emotions? Where they come?
All of them are under electromagnetic forces.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you, Pranav.
Okay, any more questions, or we can close if we do not have any more questions for the day? Okay. Okay, so thanks, Pranav. It's really a wonderful session. As before, you always start with very simple things and finally, give us an insight into very, very complicated things, and that's truly amazing. So thanks a lot, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav, for the wonderful session.
Okay, thanks, Prabhuji, and thanks, Pranav.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you?